Moonfires Claim. Talia Aldrin had always been fast enough to escape the things that lurked in the dark. Until tonight. The horn sounded. The stars vanished. The trees whispered, bending toward her. And when she ran, he was already there golden-eyed, standing in her path, his voice a quiet snarl. "You've led me on a good chase," he murmured, tilting his head. "But the hunt always takes what belongs to it." Chapter 1. The Scent of Rain and Fear. The forest breathed around Talia, a living entity that had always been both sanctuary and prison. Tonight it was neither. The familiar scent of damp earth and pine needles, usually a comfort, was laced with a sharp, metallic tang, the scent of fear, her own fear, bleeding into the night. Rain slicked her silver-streaked brown hair to her scalp, plastering her worn linen shirt to her back. She ran, her bare feet pounding a frantic rhythm against the moss-covered ground, each footfall a desperate prayer against the inevitable. She was 62, but her body, honed by a lifetime of living on the edge of survival, moved with a desperate grace. 62 years of running, of hiding, of bearing the truth of what she was so deep that even she sometimes forgot. Tonight, the forgetting was impossible. The horn sounded again, closer this time, a mournful, resonant call that vibrated in her very bones. It was a sound that bypassed her ears and went straight to her soul, a primal summons she could no longer ignore. The stars, usually her guiding lights, were swallowed by a thick, unnatural blanket of clouds. The moon, her namesake, was hidden, refusing to witness her capture. The trees, ancient and gnarled, seemed to lean towards her as she passed, their branches like skeletal arms reaching out, not to hinder, but to guide. It was a fleeting, unsettling thought. She'd always felt a connection to these woods, a kinship with the wild things that roamed them. But tonight, that kinship felt different, twisted, like a familiar friend turned menacing. She risked a glance over her shoulder, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Nothing. Just the swirling mist and the oppressive darkness. But she felt him, the presence that had been dogging her steps for weeks, growing stronger with each passing night. He was the embodiment of the wild hunt, the leader of the spectral pack that haunted her dreams and now, it seemed, her reality. She stumbled, catching herself on the rough bark of an ancient oak. Her breath hitched, a sob caught in her throat. She was tired, so terribly tired. Not just physically, but soul-weary, burdened by secrets and regrets that weighed heavier than any physical chains. For years, she had lived a quiet life in the small, isolated village of Oakhaven, a life built on carefully constructed lies and half-truths. She was the village herbalist, the quiet woman who lived on the edge of the woods, dispensing remedies and gentle wisdom. No one knew the terror that lurked beneath her calm exterior, the wildness that thrummed in her veins. She pressed her hand against the oak, drawing a shaky breath, trying to regain some semblance of control. The bark felt strangely warm beneath her palm, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic energy. It was a sensation she'd felt before, in moments of extreme stress, a connection to the earth that both grounded and terrified her. Then she saw him. He emerged from the mist like a phantom, materializing from the shadows themselves. He stood between her and the path leading back to Oakhaven, his presence blocking her escape, her only hope of sanctuary. He was tall, impossibly so, his figure silhouetted against the faint, diffused light filtering through the storm clouds. He moved with a predatory grace, an effortless power that sent shivers down her spine. As he stepped closer, the details of his appearance became shockingly clear. His eyes, the color of molten gold, held her captive, burning with an intensity that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. His hair, the color of raven's wings, framed a face that was both beautiful and savage, sculpted with sharp angles and shadowed hollows. He wore clothes that seemed woven from the darkness itself, leather and fur that blended seamlessly with the night. He tilted his head, a slight, almost curious gesture, as if studying a fascinating, yet dangerous, creature. The scent of him reached her then, a potent blend of pine needles, wood smoke, and something else, something wild and untamed, something that resonated deep within her, awakening a primal fear and a strange, unsettling recognition. "You've led me on a good chase, Talia Eldrin," he murmured, his voice a low, resonant growl that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. It was a voice that spoke of ancient forests and moonlit hunts, of power and a hint of something else, something that sounded almost like sadness. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I don't know what you want." Her voice was surprisingly steady, a testament to years of practiced deception. But beneath the surface, her heart was a frantic drumbeat, her mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. He smiled then, a slow, predatory curve of his lips that revealed a flash of white teeth. It was a smile that held no warmth, only a chilling promise. "Don't play coy with me, Talia. You know exactly what I want." She shook her head, a desperate denial. "I'm just an old woman. Leave me alone." "Old?" He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent another wave of shivers down her spine. "Perhaps. But you are far more than you appear. And you belong to the hunt. To me." He took a step closer, and she instinctively recoiled, pressing herself further against the oak. The warmth of the bark had intensified, the pulsing energy now a steady thrum. She felt a strange connection to the tree, as if it were offering her strength, protection. "I belong to no one," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rising wind. It was a lie, a desperate plea against the truth that was closing in on her. He stopped mere inches from her, his golden eyes burning into hers. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, a palpable energy that both terrified and strangely drew her in. "The hunt always takes what belongs to it," he said, his voice a soft snarl, his breath warm against her face. "And you, Talia Eldrin, have belonged to us for a very long time." His hand reached out, not to grab her, but to gently brush a stray strand of hair from her cheek. The touch, surprisingly gentle, sent a jolt of electricity through her, a shock wave that resonated deep within her bones. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. But the pain, the capture, didn't come. Instead, she felt a strange pull, a yearning for something she couldn't name, a sense of belonging. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with a newfound, terrifying clarity. The fear was still there, but beneath it, something else was stirring. Something ancient, something powerful, something wild. And in his golden eyes, she saw not a predator, but a reflection of that same wildness, a mirror to the part of herself she had buried for so long. What would happen if she, Talia, stopped running? Chapter 2. Echoes of a Forgotten Life. The world tilted. Not physically, but internally, as if the very foundations of Talia's reality were shifting beneath her feet. His touch, the brief, electric contact of his fingers against her skin, had unlocked something within her, a cascade of forgotten memories and suppressed emotions. She gasped, clutching at the rough bark of the oak for support, her mind reeling. Images flashed before her eyes, fragmented, disjointed, yet undeniably real. A younger version of herself, laughing, running through a moonlit forest, her hair of vibrant auburn instead of the silver-streaked brown it was now. A different man, his face obscured by shadow, but his presence radiating the same potent energy as the hunter before her. A feeling of belonging, of wild, untamed joy, a sense of being utterly, completely free. Then, darkness. Pain. A scream tearing through the night. The scent of blood, thick and metallic, mingling with the sweet fragrance of wildflowers. A sense of loss so profound, so devastating, that it threatened to consume her. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the onslaught of images, but they were relentless, flooding her senses, overwhelming her carefully constructed defenses. The quiet life she had built in Oakhaven, the persona of the gentle herbalist, crumbled around her like dust. What was that? She whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and confusion. The hunter, she still didn't know his name, watched her with an unnerving stillness, his golden eyes gleaming in the darkness. He didn't answer her question. Instead, he simply waited, his presence a silent, watchful force. He straightened, the movement fluid and graceful, and took a step back, giving her space to breathe. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, a palpable energy that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. "You remember," he said, his voice low and resonant, a statement, not a question. She shook her head, a denial that was more instinct than conviction. I don't understand. Those were dreams. Just dreams." He raised an eyebrow, a skeptical expression that sent a fresh wave of shivers down her spine. Were they Talia? Or were they echoes of a life you chose to forget? The question hung in the air, heavy and pregnant, with unspoken meaning. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze, her mind struggling to reconcile the fragmented memories with the reality she had known for so long. She had always had strange dreams, vivid and unsettling, filled with images of running through forests, of hunting under the moonlight, of a wild, untamed freedom that both terrified and exhilarated her. She had dismissed them as the product of an overactive imagination, a subconscious yearning for a life she could never have. But now, confronted with this hunter, with his unsettling presence and the undeniable power he exuded, she was forced to question everything she thought she knew about herself. Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He tilted his head, a slight, almost amused gesture. "You may call me Lorcan," he said. "And as for who I am the leader of the Wild Hunt." "Your leader." The word struck her like a physical blow. The Wild Hunt. A legend, a myth, a story told to frighten children. She had always dismissed it as folklore, a fanciful tale with no basis in reality. But now, standing before Lorcan, she knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was more than just a story. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice shaking. Lorcan smiled, a slow, predatory curve of his lips that sent a shiver of fear down her spine. "Is it Talia? Or is it simply the truth you have been running from for far too long?" He reached out again, this time taking her hand in his. His grip was firm but not painful, his touch sending another wave of that strange, electric energy through her. She tried to pull away, but her body refused to obey, her limbs heavy and unresponsive. His thumb gently stroked the back of her hand, a surprisingly intimate gesture that sent a confusing mix of fear and something else, something that felt strangely like longing through her. She looked down at their joined hands, her own pale and weathered, his strong and dark, marked with strange, intricate patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer in the faint light. "The bond between us is ancient," Talia, Lorcan said, his voice a low murmur that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. "It cannot be broken, no matter how hard you try." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. She saw the power, the wildness, the undeniable threat. But she also saw something else, something that was harder to define. A flicker of vulnerability, a hint of sadness, a shadow of loneliness. What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice stronger now, fueled by a desperate need for answers. Lorcan's gaze held hers, his golden eyes burning with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "I want you to remember," he said. "I want you to embrace who you truly are. I want you to return to the hunt." Return. The word echoed in her mind, resonating with the fragmented memories that were now swirling through her consciousness. Return to a life she had forgotten, a life of wildness and freedom, a life of belonging? But at what cost? The quiet life she had built, the fragile peace she had found, would be shattered. The people she cared about, the villagers who trusted her, would be in danger. And what of the darkness, the pain, the loss that she had glimpsed in those fleeting memories? Was she strong enough to face that again? Was the pull she began to feel towards him, towards Lorcan, merely a remnant of a past curse, or the faint whisper of a soul bond that was only now reawakening? Could she ever truly trust the man, the creature that stood before her? Chapter 3. The Hunter's Claim. Lorcan's words hung in the air, a heavy weight pressing down on Talia. Return to the hunt. The phrase echoed the unsettling memories, the flashes of a life she couldn't fully grasp, yet felt undeniably drawn to. It was a proposition both terrifying and strangely alluring, a siren's call to a past she had buried beneath layers of carefully constructed lies. She pulled her hand from his, the sudden break in contact sending a jolt of cold through her. I can't, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. I have a life here. People who depend on me. Lorcan's expression didn't change, his golden eyes still fixed on hers, unwavering in their intensity. A life built on sand, Talia. A life that denies who you truly are. His words struck a nerve, a raw, exposed part of her that she had tried to ignore for so long. She had always felt like an outsider in Oakhaven, a stranger in a familiar land. The villagers were kind, accepting of her quirks, but there was always a distance, a subtle barrier that she could never quite overcome. She had attributed it to her solitary nature, her preference for the quiet solitude of the woods, but now, she wondered if it was something more, something deeper, a fundamental difference that set her apart. They need me, she insisted, clinging to the familiar, the safe, the mundane. I'm the village herbalist. I heal their ailments. Lorcan cut her off with a dismissive wave of his hand. They will survive. They always do. But you, Talia, you are fading. Living a half-life, denying your true nature. It is killing you, slowly but surely. His words were like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of her. She had been feeling it, the growing weariness, the sense of emptiness that had been creeping into her soul. She had attributed it to age, to the inevitable decline of her physical body, but now, she saw it for what it truly was, a slow, agonizing withering of her spirit. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze, her eyes tracing the intricate patterns of the oak bark. The tree still pulsed with that strange, comforting energy, a silent witness to her internal turmoil. She felt a desperate need to understand, to make sense of the chaos that was unfolding within her. Tell me, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Tell me about the hunt, about who I was. Lorcan stepped closer, his presence filling her senses, his scent that intoxicating mix of pine needles, wood smoke, and wildness enveloping her. He reached out and gently cupped her chin, tilting her face up so that she was forced to meet his gaze. You were a warrior, Talia, he said, his voice low and resonant, a voice that seemed to speak directly to her soul. A leader, fierce, fearless, and utterly free. You ran with the hunt, under the moonlight, your spirit soaring with the wild things of the forest. You were one with the night, with the earth, with me. His words painted a picture that was both terrifying and exhilarating, a vision of a life so different from the one she had known for so long. She saw herself, young and vibrant, running through the forest, her laughter echoing through the trees. She felt the wind in her hair, the earth beneath her feet, the thrill of the chase, the sense of belonging, of being part of something larger than herself. But then, the darkness returned, the pain, the loss, the scream that tore through the night. She flinched, pulling away from his touch, her eyes wide with fear. What happened? She whispered, her voice trembling. Why did I leave? Lorcan's expression softened, a flicker of something that looked almost like regret crossing his features. He hesitated, as if struggling to find the right words. There was a betrayal, he said finally, his voice heavy with unspoken emotion. A war. You were lost. Taken. And the hunt, we mourned you. We searched for you. For centuries. His words were vague, offering only glimpses of the truth, but they were enough to send a fresh wave of pain through her. She had been betrayed, lost, taken. And the hunt, her hunt, had mourned her. The realization was both devastating and strangely comforting. But how did I end up here? She asked, her voice choked with emotion. In Oakhaven? A spell, Lorcan said, his voice tight with anger. A powerful, ancient magic that stripped you of your memories, bound you to this place, and hid you from us. A curse cast by those who sought to destroy the hunt. A curse. The word resonated with the fragmented memories, the sense of being trapped, of being forced to live a life that was not her own. It explained the strange dreams, the feeling of being an outsider, the constant yearning for something she couldn't name. "And you broke the curse?" she asked, her voice filled with a hesitant hope. Lorcan shook his head. "Not entirely. It weakens with time, with your proximity to the hunt. Tonight was the culmination of that weakening. The call was too strong for you to resist. For me to resist." He reached out and took her hand again, his touch sending that familiar jolt of electricity through her. She didn't pull away this time, her body too weary, her mind too overwhelmed to resist. "The curse is still there, Talia," he said, his voice soft, almost gentle. "But it is fading. And with each passing day, you will remember more. You will become more." He looked deep into her eyes, his gaze searching, probing, as if trying to unlock the secrets that lay hidden within her. And in that moment, she saw not a predator, not a captor, but a creature who was bound to her by something ancient and powerful, something that transcended fear and reason, something that felt strangely like fate. The decision loomed, stark and terrifying. Stay and wither, or return and face the unknown dangers of a life reclaimed. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Ancient Pact. The weight of Lorcan's words settled upon Talia, a tangible burden that mirrored the turmoil within her. The curse, he said, was fading. But the prospect of remembering, of becoming, was a double-edged sword. It promised a return to a life of power and freedom, but it also threatened to unearth the pain and loss that had driven her into hiding in the first place. She looked at their joined hands, his dark and strong, hers pale and trembling. The strange energy that flowed between them was undeniable, a physical manifestation of the bond he spoke of, the ancient pact that tied them together. It was a connection that both terrified and fascinated her, a pull that was both repulsive and strangely irresistible. "If I return," she said, her voice hesitant, her eyes searching his, "what then? What will become of me?" Lorcan's grip tightened slightly, a reassuring pressure that sent a shiver of warmth through her. "You will become who you were always meant to be, Talia. A leader, a warrior, a vital part of the hunt. You will reclaim your power, your freedom, your place." His words were seductive, painting a picture of a life that was both glorious and terrifying. She imagined herself running with the hunt, under the moonlight, her spirit soaring with the wild things of the forest. She saw herself strong and fearless, a force to be reckoned with. But then, the doubts crept in, the shadows of her fragmented memories whispering warnings of betrayal and loss. "And what of the betrayal?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The war? The ones who curse me?" Lorcan's expression darkened, a flicker of anger crossing his features. "They will be dealt with," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "They have paid for their crimes, but their legacy it lingers. There are still those who seek to destroy the hunt, to control its power for their own selfish ends." His words sent a chill down her spine. The world he described was far more dangerous, far more complex than the quiet, predictable life she had known in Oakhaven. It was a world of ancient magic, of power struggles, of constant threat. Was she strong enough to face that? Was she brave enough to risk everything for a life she couldn't even fully remember? I need time," she said, her voice trembling. "Time to think, to understand." Lorcan nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "I understand," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "But time it is not a luxury we have in abundance. The curse may be fading, but it is not yet broken. And there are others who are searching for you." "Others?" The word sent a fresh wave of fear through her. "Who?" she asked, her voice sharp with alarm. "Those who fear the hunt," Lorcan said, his voice low and ominous. "Those who would see it destroyed. They know you are the key, Talia. The key to unlocking its full power or to shattering it completely." His words painted a terrifying picture, a world where she was a pawn in a dangerous game, hunted by both sides, a target for those who sought to control her power. It was a far cry from the quiet, peaceful life she had known, a life where her greatest concern was the next harvest or the well-being of her neighbors. "I don't want to be a key," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I just want peace." Lorcan's gaze softened, a flicker of compassion crossing his features. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek, his touch sending another jolt of that strange, electric energy through her. "I know, Talia," he said, his voice a low murmur. "But peace, it is not always possible. Sometimes we must fight for it. Sometimes we must embrace the wildness within us to protect what we hold dear." His words resonated with a truth that she couldn't deny. She had always been a fighter, even in her quiet, unassuming way. She had fought to survive, to build a life for herself, to protect those she cared about. But now, the fight was different, the stakes higher, the enemy far more powerful. "Tell me more," she said, her voice firmer now, fueled by a desperate need to understand.
"Tell me about the pact."
"The bond between us." Lorcan smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of anticipation through her. "It is an ancient pact," he said, his voice taking on a storyteller's cadence, "forged long ago, between your ancestors and mine. A pact of mutual protection, of shared power, of intertwined destinies." He began to pace slowly, his movements fluid and graceful, his voice weaving a tale of magic and mystery. He spoke of a time when the veil between worlds was thin, when humans and supernatural creatures lived in closer proximity, when the wild hunt roamed free, protecting the balance between the mortal and the ethereal realms. "Your bloodline, Talia," he said, "is one of the oldest, one of the most powerful. You are descended from a line of witches, of shapeshifters, of guardians of the ancient ways. And I am descended from the first hunter, the one who forged the pact, who swore to protect your line, to guide you, to love you."
Love.
The word hung in the air, heavy and pregnant with unspoken meaning. She looked at him, her eyes searching his, trying to decipher the truth behind his words. Was he telling her the truth? Or was he simply manipulating her, using her desire for answers, her yearning for belonging, to lure her back to the hunt? The old oak rustled, the sound like a sigh on the night air, a quiet agreement, or perhaps a warning she was choosing to ignore. Could she trust a being of legend, one inherently tied to the wildness she'd spent a lifetime suppressing? Chapter 5. Sanctuary in the Storm. The rain, which had been a steady downpour, began to soften, easing into a gentle drizzle. The storm clouds, though still heavy and dark, started to thin, revealing glimpses of the hidden moon. The change in the weather mirrored the shift in Talia's internal landscape, the easing of the immediate terror, replaced by a cautious curiosity, a hesitant hope. Lorcan's tale of the ancient pact, of the intertwined destinies of their bloodlines, had resonated deep within her, awakening a sense of belonging, of purpose, that she had never known before. But the doubts remained, the whispers of her fragmented memories warning of betrayal and loss. "Love," she repeated, the word feeling foreign and fragile on her tongue. "You said love. But how can that be? We are different." Lorcan stopped pacing and turned to face her, his golden eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "Different, yes," he said, his voice low and resonant. "But not incompatible. The pact was forged on a foundation of mutual respect, of shared power, of a love that transcended the boundaries of species, of worlds." He reached out and took her hand again, his touch sending that familiar jolt of electricity through her. She didn't pull away this time, her body too weary, her mind too intrigued to resist. "It is a soul bond, Talia," he said, his voice a soft murmur. "A connection that goes beyond the physical, beyond the rational. It is a recognition, a knowing, a yearning that cannot be denied." His words echoed the strange, unsettling feelings that had been stirring within her since their first encounter. The fear was still there, but beneath it, there was a growing sense of familiarity, of rightness. It was as if a part of her, a long dormant part, was awakening, recognizing him, reaching out to him. "But I don't remember," she whispered, her voice filled with a desperate plea. "I don't remember any of this." Lorcan's grip tightened slightly, a reassuring pressure. "You will," he said. "The memories are there, buried beneath the layers of the curse. They will surface, slowly but surely. And I will help you." His promise was both comforting and terrifying. The prospect of remembering, of facing the pain and loss that had driven her into hiding, was daunting. But the thought of doing it alone, of facing the unknown without his guidance, was even more frightening. Where would we go?" she asked, her voice hesitant, her eyes searching his. If I were to return." Lorcan smiled, a slow, genuine smile that softened his features, making him appear almost human. "To my home," he said. "To the heart of the wild hunt. A place of sanctuary, of power, of belonging." He described a place hidden deep within the ancient forests, a realm untouched by the modern world, a haven for those who embraced their wild nature. He spoke of towering trees, of crystal-clear rivers, of moonlit glades where the hunt gathered, their spirits soaring with the wild things of the earth. It sounded like a fairy tale, a dream, a world so different from the quiet, mundane reality of Oakhaven. But the more he spoke, the more she felt drawn to it, the more she yearned for the freedom, the power, the sense of belonging that he promised. "But what about the others?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "The ones who hunt me? The ones who want to destroy the hunt?" Lorcan's expression hardened, a flicker of anger crossing his features. "They will not find you there," he said, his voice firm. "My home is protected by ancient magic, by powerful wards that shield it from those who would do us harm. You will be safe there, Talia. I swear it." His vow, spoken with such conviction, such unwavering certainty, sent a wave of relief through her. She had been running for so long, hiding in the shadows, living in constant fear. The thought of finding sanctuary, of being protected, of finally being able to let down her guard, was almost overwhelming. The rain had stopped completely now, and the moon, fully unveiled, cast a silvery glow over the forest. The air was clean and fresh, washed clean by the storm. Talia looked up at the moon, her namesake, and felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. She turned back to Lorcan, her eyes meeting his. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the dominant emotion. It was tempered by curiosity, by hope, by a growing sense of trust. She began, her voice hesitant then firmer, "I will go with you." Lorcan's smile widened, his golden eyes gleaming with a mixture of triumph and something else, something that looked almost like relief. He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch sending a shiver of warmth through her. "You will not regret this, Talia," he said, his voice soft, almost tender. "You're coming home." Home. The word resonated deep within her, striking a chord that she had never known existed. It was a word that spoke of belonging, of acceptance, of love. She leaned into his touch, her body swaying towards his, drawn to his warmth, his strength, his promise. He lowered his head, his breath warm against her face, and for a moment, she thought he was going to kiss her. But he hesitated, his eyes searching hers, as if asking for permission. The pause stretched, heavy with unspoken emotion. A distant howl echoed through the forest, a mournful, yet strangely beautiful sound. It was a reminder of the wildness that awaited her, of the dangers, but also of the freedom. What would the others of the hunt think of her? Would they accept the return of the lost one? Chapter 6. Scars beneath the surface. The howl faded into the stillness of the night, leaving a palpable silence in its wake. It was a silence filled with unspoken questions, with anticipation, with the weight of Talia's decision. She had agreed to go with Lorcan, to return to the wild hunt, to a life she couldn't remember but felt undeniably drawn to. Lorcan's hands still cupped her face, his thumbs gently stroking her cheekbones, his golden eyes searching hers. The hesitation remained, the unspoken question hanging in the air between them. She realized, with a sudden jolt of awareness that he was giving her a choice, a chance to back out, to return to the safety of her old life. But the thought of returning to Oakhaven, to the quiet, predictable routine, to the sense of emptiness that had been gnawing at her soul, filled her with a profound sense of dread. She had made her decision, and she would not go back on it. She met his gaze, her eyes unwavering, and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was a silent affirmation, a permission, a surrender. He lowered his head, his lips brushing against hers, a soft, tentative touch that sent a wave of heat through her. It was not a passionate kiss, not a demand, but a greeting, a welcome, a promise. It was a taste of something ancient and powerful, something that resonated deep within her, awakening a longing that she had never known before. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers, his expression questioning. She responded with a gentle pressure of her own, her lips lingering against his for a moment longer, before she too pulled back. "We should go," she said, her voice a soft whisper, her breath warm against his face. He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement, his eyes still locked on hers. He took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring, and led her away from the oak, away from the path that led back to Oakhaven, and deeper into the heart of the forest. As they walked, the trees seemed to close in around them, their branches intertwining overhead, creating a natural canopy that shielded them from the moonlight. The air grew cooler, the scent of pine needles and damp earth stronger, more intense. She felt a strange sense of homecoming, as if she were returning to a place she had known long ago, a place that had been waiting for her. Lorcan didn't speak, but his presence was a constant reassurance, a silent promise of protection. She felt his gaze on her, watchful, protective, and something else, something that she couldn't quite define. It was a look of admiration? Of longing? She glanced at him, her eyes tracing the sharp angles of his face, the shadowed hollows beneath his cheekbones, the intensity of his golden eyes. He was beautiful, undeniably so, but it was a beauty that was both alluring and terrifying, a beauty that spoke of power and wildness, of a world that was both dangerous and exhilarating. "You said I was a warrior," she said, her voice breaking the silence, her words echoing in the stillness of the forest. "A leader? Well, what kind of warrior?" Lorcan smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of anticipation through her. "The best kind," he said, his voice low and resonant. "A shapeshifter. A protector of the innocent. A force to be reckoned with." Shapeshifter. The word sent a jolt of recognition through her, awakening a flicker of memory, a fleeting image of herself running through the forest, not as a human, but as something else. A wolf. A hawk. She couldn't quite grasp it, the image too fragmented, too elusive. "I can change form?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and wonder. Lorcan nodded. "You can," he said. "It is in your blood, Talia. It is part of who you are. You will learn to control it, to harness its power. I will teach you." The thought of transforming, of shedding her human form and embracing her wild nature, was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was a power that she had never imagined possessing, a power that held both immense potential and immense danger. What about my magic?" she asked, remembering the warmth of the oak, the strange energy that had flowed through her. "I felt something, a connection to the earth." "You are a witch, Talia," Lorcan said, his voice filled with respect. "A powerful one. Your magic is tied to the earth, to the natural world. You can heal, you can protect, you can command." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "But your magic, it has been suppressed," he said. "The curse, it has weakened you, both physically and magically. It has left scars, Talia. Scars that go deeper than the surface." His words struck a chord, a raw, exposed part of her that she had tried to ignore for so long. She had always felt a sense of incompleteness, a feeling that something was missing, something was broken. She had attributed it to the loss of her memories, to the trauma of her past, but now, she realized that it was more than that. It was a fundamental weakening of her very being, a suppression of her true nature. She looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the lines on her palms, the wrinkles that spoke of age and hardship. She felt a sudden surge of anger, a burning resentment towards those who had cursed her, who had stolen her life, who had left her so diminished. Where would she even begin to heal the scars left by the curse, the deep wounds inflicted upon her spirit and magic? Chapter 7. The Price of Freedom. The anger that surged through Talia was a new sensation, a fiery heat that burned away the lingering fear and replaced it with a fierce determination. For so long, she had been a victim, running, hiding, living in the shadows. But now, she was ready to fight, to reclaim her power, to heal the scars that had been inflicted upon her.
How?
She asked, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. How do I heal? How do I reclaim my magic? Lorcan's expression softened, a flicker of compassion crossing his features. He reached out and gently cupped her cheek, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her, calming the fiery anger that threatened to consume her. Slowly, Talia, he said, his voice a low murmur.
Gently.
It will take time, patience, and trust.
Trust.
The word hung in the air, heavy and pregnant with unspoken meaning. She had trusted him enough to leave Oakhaven, to follow him into the unknown. But could she truly trust him, a creature of the wild hunt, a being so different from herself? Could she trust him with her vulnerabilities, with her deepest fears, with her broken magic? She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception, of manipulation, of anything that would betray his true intentions. But all she saw was sincerity, compassion, and something else, something that looked almost like love. It will not be easy, he continued, his voice breaking the silence. The curse has left deep wounds, and they will not heal overnight. You will need to reconnect with your true nature, to embrace the wildness within you, to surrender. Surrender. The word sent a shiver of apprehension through her. It was a word that implied vulnerability, a loss of control, a giving up of power. But it was also a word that spoke of liberation, of freedom, of letting go of the burdens that she had carried for so long. Surrender to what? She asked, her voice hesitant, her eyes searching his. To the hunt, he said, his voice soft, almost gentle. To your magic.
To me.
His words were both terrifying and alluring, a siren's call to a world that was both dangerous and exhilarating. She felt a pull towards him, a yearning for the connection that he promised, for the belonging, for the love. But she also felt a resistance, a fear of losing herself, of becoming something other. I don't know if I can, she whispered, her voice trembling. Lorcan smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of anticipation through her. You can, Talia, he said. You are stronger than you think. And you're not alone. I will be with you, every step of the way. His promise was a lifeline, a source of strength in the face of the overwhelming uncertainty that lay ahead. She clung to it, drawing comfort from his presence, from his unwavering belief in her. They continued walking deeper into the forest, the trees growing taller, the air growing cooler, the silence growing more profound. She felt a sense of anticipation, a feeling that they were approaching something significant, something sacred. Finally, they reached a clearing, a circular space bathed in the silvery light of the moon. In the center of the clearing stood a massive oak tree, even larger than the one she had encountered earlier. Its branches reached up to the sky, like the arms of a giant, embracing the heavens. This is it, Lorcan said, his voice filled with reverence. The heart of the hunt. The place where we gather, where we connect with the ancient magic, where we become. He led her to the base of the tree, where a circle of stones had been arranged, forming a natural altar. The air around the tree hummed with energy, a palpable force that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. This is where you will begin your healing, Lorcan said. This is where you will reconnect with your magic, with your true nature, with yourself. He instructed her to sit in the center of the circle, to close her eyes, to breathe deeply, to let go of her fear, her doubts, her resistance. She followed his instructions, her body trembling, her mind racing, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. As she sat there, surrounded by the ancient magic of the oak, she felt a strange sensation, a tingling in her fingertips, a warmth spreading through her chest, a connection to the earth beneath her. It was a feeling she had experienced before, in moments of extreme stress, but now it was amplified, intensified, magnified by the power of the hunt. She opened her eyes, her gaze drawn to Lorcan. He was standing before her, his golden eyes gleaming in the moonlight, his expression filled with hope. What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lorcan smiled. "You let go," he said. "You trust. You surrender." He knelt, his movements casting flickering shadows, and held out a small, intricately carved wooden box. The price of reclaiming her life was clear. Full surrender to the hunt, to the wild magic, and to him, Lorcan. But what further challenges, what dangers, awaited her within this mysterious sanctuary? Chapter 8. Glimmers of a Shared Past. Lorcan opened the wooden box, revealing a bed of soft moss upon which rested a single, silver ring. It was a simple band, unadorned except for a delicate, almost invisible engraving of intertwined wolves, their heads thrown back in a silent howl. "This was your mother's," Lorcan said, his voice a low murmur that seemed to blend with the rustling of the leaves overhead. "She wore it always, a symbol of her connection to the hunt, to her power, to her love." Talia reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the cool metal of the ring. A jolt of energy, similar to the one she had felt from Lorcan's touch, surged through her, bringing with it a wave of sadness, of longing, of recognition. She slipped the ring onto her left ring finger, the fit perfect, as if it had been made for her. As the silver band settled against her skin, another wave of memories, stronger and clearer than before, flooded her consciousness. She saw a woman, tall and beautiful, with long, auburn hair and eyes the same shade of molten gold as Lorcan's. The woman was laughing, her voice a melodic sound that filled the forest with joy. She was holding a small child, a girl with bright, curious eyes and a mischievous smile, Talia herself. The woman her mother was teaching her to shapeshift, to embrace her wild nature, to run with the hunt. She saw herself transforming, first into a wolf cub, then into a hawk, soaring through the sky, feeling the wind beneath her wings, the freedom of the wild. She saw Lorcan, younger then, but still recognizable, his features softer, his expression less guarded. He was watching her, his eyes filled with admiration, with affection, with love. He was her friend, her companion, her protector. But then, the darkness returned, the pain, the loss, the betrayal. She saw the woman her mother fall, struck down by a dark, shadowy figure, her silver ring flying through the air, landing at the feet of a young, terrified Talia. She gasped, pulling her hand back as if the ring were burning her skin. The memories were too intense, too painful, too real. She looked at Lorcan, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and confusion. "My mother," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She died.
Protecting me."
Lorcan nodded, his expression somber, his golden eyes filled with a deep, abiding sadness.
"She did," he said.
"She sacrificed herself to save you, to give you a chance to escape, to live." The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her mother had died protecting her, and she had spent her entire life running from that sacrifice, hiding from the truth, denying her heritage. I didn't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't remember." "The curse," Lorcan said, his voice tight with anger. "It stole your memories, your power, your identity. But it could not steal your spirit, Talia. It could not extinguish the flame that burned within you." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her, calming the storm of emotions that raged within her. "Your mother was a great warrior, Talia," he said. "A powerful witch, a loving mother, and she would be proud of you, proud of the woman you have become, despite everything." His words were a balm to her wounded soul, a source of comfort in the face of the overwhelming grief that threatened to consume her. She looked at the ring on her finger, the silver band gleaming in the moonlight, a symbol of her mother's love, of her sacrifice, of her legacy. I want to honor her memory, she said, her voice firmer now, fueled by a newfound determination. I want to reclaim my heritage. I want to become who I was always meant to be. Lorcan smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes, making them shine with a warmth that melted the remaining ice around her heart. You will, Talia, he said. I know you will. He helped her to her feet, his touch lingering on her hand for a moment longer than necessary, sending another shiver of anticipation through her. He led her away from the altar, towards a small, secluded cottage nestled amongst the trees. This will be your home, he said, his voice soft, almost gentle. A place where you can rest, where you can heal, where you can learn. The cottage was small but cozy, built of rough-hewn logs and covered with a thick layer of moss. It had a single room, with a large fireplace at one end, a comfortable-looking bed in the corner, and a small table and chairs by the window. It was simple, rustic, and perfect. It felt like a sanctuary, a place where she could finally let down her guard, where she could be herself, without fear, without judgment, without pretense. As she stepped inside, she noticed a small, wooden chest tucked beneath the window. It was old, worn, and covered with intricate carvings, similar to the ones on the box that had held her mother's ring. What's this? She asked, her voice curious, her fingers tracing the delicate carvings. Lorcan smiled. A gift, he said. From your mother. Something she wanted you to have when you were ready. He opened the chest, revealing a collection of objects, a worn leather-bound journal, a set of intricately carved wooden runes, a small, silver dagger, and a beautiful, flowing gown made of a shimmering, silvery fabric. These objects, remnants of a past life, whispered promises of rediscovery. But what secrets did the journal hold, and what dangers would the dagger be needed for? Chapter 9. The Unveiling of the Moon. Talia picked up the leather-bound journal, its surface worn smooth with age and use. The scent of old parchment and dried herbs wafted from its pages, a familiar and comforting aroma that stirred something deep within her. It was her mother's journal, a record of her life, her thoughts, her magic. She sat down by the window, the moonlight streaming through the glass, illuminating the pages as she carefully opened the book. The first entry was dated many years ago, written in a flowing, elegant script that was both beautiful and familiar. My dearest Talia, it began, if you are reading this, then I am gone. But know that I love you, more than words can say. I have tried to prepare you for this day, to teach you everything you need to know, but I fear it is not enough. The world is a dangerous place, my love, especially for those like us, those who carry the ancient magic, those who are bound to the wild hunt. Talia's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding with a mixture of grief and anticipation. She continued reading, her eyes devouring the words, her mind absorbing the knowledge, the wisdom, the love that poured from the pages. Her mother wrote of the ancient pact, of the bond between their bloodline and the wild hunt, of the responsibilities that came with their power. She wrote of the dangers they faced, of the enemies who sought to destroy them, of the constant threat of betrayal and loss. But she also wrote of the beauty, the wonder, the freedom of their lives. She wrote of the joy of shape-shifting, of running with the hunt under the moonlight, of the deep connection to the natural world, of the love that bound them together. As Talia read, she felt a growing sense of understanding, of connection to her mother, to her heritage, to herself. The fragmented memories that had been haunting her began to coalesce, forming a clearer, more coherent picture of her past. She learned of her training, of her skills as a warrior, as a witch, as a shapeshifter. She learned of her relationship with Lorcan, of their friendship, their companionship, their growing affection. She read of the betrayal, of the war, of her mother's sacrifice. She read of the curse, of the spell that had been cast upon her, stripping her of her memories, binding her to Oakhaven, hiding her from the hunt. And she read of her mother's hope, her unwavering belief that one day, Talia would remember, that she would reclaim her power, that she would return. Talia closed the journal, her hands trembling, her eyes filled with tears. She had found a treasure, a connection to her past, a guide for her future. But the knowledge came with a heavy burden, a responsibility to honor her mother's memory, to fulfill her destiny, to fight. She looked up, her gaze drawn to the moon, which was now hanging high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the forest. It was a full moon, a powerful moon, a hunter's moon. She felt a stirring within her, a surge of energy, a wildness that she had never known before. It was as if the moon itself was calling to her, summoning her, awakening the ancient magic that lay dormant within her. She stood up, her body feeling stronger, more alive than it had in years. She walked to the chest and picked up the silver dagger, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. It felt familiar in her hand, as if she had held it many times before. She looked at the shimmering, silvery gown, the fabric flowing like liquid moonlight. It was a warrior's gown, a huntress's gown, a queen's gown. She knew what she had to do. She had to embrace her destiny, to reclaim her power, to become. She shed her worn linen clothes, the remnants of her old life, the life she had left behind. She slipped the silvery gown over her head, the fabric cool and smooth against her skin. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and focused on the moon, on the power that flowed through her, on the wildness that was awakening within her. She imagined herself transforming, shedding her human form, embracing her true nature. She felt a tingling sensation, a shifting, a changing. She opened her eyes and looked down at her hands. They were no longer human. They were paws. She was a wolf, a magnificent silver wolf, her fur gleaming in the moonlight. She threw back her head and howled, a long, mournful, yet triumphant sound that echoed through the forest. It was a call to the hunt, a declaration of her return, a promise of vengeance. But as she stood there, bathed in the moonlight, a new fear crept into her heart. Would she be able to control this newfound power? Would she be able to face the enemies that awaited her? And what if Lorcan could she truly trust him with her heart, as well as her life? The unveiling of her true self was only the beginning. Chapter 10. A Dance of Shadows and Secrets. The howl faded into the stillness of the night, leaving a palpable sense of power, of wildness, of change. Talia stood there, in her wolf form, feeling the cool night air on her fur, the earth beneath her paws, the ancient magic coursing through her veins. It was a sensation both exhilarating and terrifying, a feeling of freedom and power she had never known before, yet also a sense of vulnerability, of being exposed, of being hunted. She took a few tentative steps, her movements at first clumsy, then growing more confident, more graceful, as her instincts took over. She ran through the clearing, her senses heightened, her awareness expanded, taking in the sights, the sounds, the smells of the forest with a newfound clarity. She could smell the damp earth, the pine needles, the faint scent of deer in the distance. She could hear the rustling of leaves, the hooting of an owl, the whisper of the wind. And she could feel Lorcan's presence, nearby, watching her, his energy a warm, comforting presence in the vastness of the forest. She turned towards him, her golden eyes the same shade as his meeting his gaze. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, still in his human form, his expression a mixture of admiration, of pride, of something else, something that she couldn't quite define. He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes, making them shine with a warmth that melted the remaining ice around her heart. He took a step towards her, then another, and another until he was standing just a few feet away. He didn't speak, but his eyes said it all. He was acknowledging her transformation, her power, her return. He reached out, his hand hovering over her head, hesitant, as if asking for permission. She lowered her head slightly, a silent invitation, and he gently stroked her fur, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her, calming the lingering fear that still clung to her. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. "You are truly your mother's daughter." His words brought a fresh wave of emotion, a mixture of grief and pride, of sadness and joy. She leaned into his touch, her body swaying towards his, drawn to his warmth, his strength, his presence. He continued to stroke her fur, his touch slow and deliberate, his fingers tracing the contours of her body, sending shivers of pleasure through her. It was a sensation both comforting and exciting, a feeling of being cherished, of being protected, of being loved. She closed her eyes, savoring the moment, the connection, the intimacy. She felt safe, secure, and at peace. But then, a sudden sound, a rustling in the undergrowth, broke the spell. She lifted her head, her ears pricked, her senses on high alert. Something was out there, something watching them. Lorcan felt it too, his body tensing, his hand stilling on her fur. He turned his head, his golden eyes scanning the shadows, searching for the source of the disturbance. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a silent thought, a mental communication that was both instinctive and natural. "I don't know," he replied, his voice also a thought, his mind reaching out to hers. "But it doesn't feel friendly." The rustling grew louder, closer, and then a figure emerged from the shadows. It was another wolf, but not one of the hunt. Its fur was dark, almost black, its eyes a burning red, its stance aggressive, its growl a low, menacing sound that sent a shiver of fear down Talia's spine. "A rogue," Lorcan said, his voice tight with anger. "One of the outcasts. They have been drawn to your power, Talia. To your transformation." The rogue wolf took a step forward, its lips curling back in a snarl, revealing sharp, white teeth. It was clearly challenging her, testing her, threatening her. Talia felt a surge of anger, a protective instinct, a wildness that she had never known before. She stepped forward, meeting the rogue wolf's gaze, her own golden eyes burning with defiance. She growled, a low, guttural sound that echoed through the clearing, a warning, a challenge, a promise. The rogue wolf hesitated, taken aback by her sudden display of power, of confidence, of authority. It took a step back, its growl softening, its stance less aggressive. But then, it lunged, attacking her with a speed and ferocity that caught her off guard. She sidestepped the attack, narrowly avoiding its sharp claws, but the rogue wolf was relentless, pressing its advantage, forcing her to defend herself. They danced in the moonlight, a whirlwind of fur and teeth, of growls and snarls, of shadows and secrets. It was a battle not just of physical strength, but of wills, of power, of destinies. This dance, a brutal ballet under the hunter's moon, was a test. Could Talia truly embrace her new form, her new power, and defend herself against the dangers that came with it? And what other secrets, what other threats, lurked just beyond the edge of the clearing? Chapter 11. The Heart's Rebellion. The fight was fierce, a primal ballet of instinct and aggression. Talia, still new to her wolf form, found herself relying on reflexes she didn't know she possessed. The rogue was larger, more experienced, but she was driven by a fierce protectiveness, not just of herself, but of Lorcan, of the hunt, of the life she was just beginning to reclaim. She dodged and weaved, using her agility to evade the rogue's attacks, snapping and snarling, her teeth finding purchase on its flank, drawing a yelp of pain. The scent of blood, both hers and the rogue's, filled the air, adding a sharp, metallic tang to the scent of pine and damp earth. Lorcan stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the fight, his body tense, his hands clenched into fists. He didn't interfere, knowing that this was a test Talia had to face alone, a trial by fire that would forge her into the warrior she was meant to be. But his heart ached with every snarl, every growl, every near miss. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from harm, but he knew that he couldn't. He had to trust her, to believe in her strength, her resilience, her power. Talia felt his presence, his concern, his love. It gave her strength, fueled her determination, pushed her to fight harder, to fight smarter, to win. She saw an opening, a moment of vulnerability in the rogue's stance, and she seized it. She lunged, her jaws closing around its throat, not to kill, but to subdue, to force it to submit. The rogue struggled, its body thrashing, its claws raking against her fur, but she held on, her grip tightening, her teeth sinking deeper, until finally it went limp, whimpering, acknowledging her dominance. She released her hold, stepping back, her chest heaving, her body bruised and aching, but her spirit soaring. She had won. She had proven herself, not just to the rogue but to herself, to Lorcan, to the hunt. The rogue wolf, defeated and humiliated, slunk away into the shadows, disappearing into the darkness from whence it came. Talia turned to Lorcan, her golden eyes meeting his. He was smiling, a proud, admiring smile that sent a wave of warmth through her, melting the lingering fear and replacing it with a sense of triumph. He walked towards her, his movements slow and deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. He reached out and gently stroked her fur, his touch sending shivers of pleasure through her. "You are magnificent," he said, his voice a low murmur, his words a silent thought that resonated deep within her. Brave, strong, and utterly breathtaking. His words brought a blush to her cheeks, even in her wolf form. She lowered her head, embarrassed by his praise, but also pleased. He continued to stroke her fur, his touch lingering on her wounds, his magic flowing into her, soothing the pain, healing the injuries. She felt a warmth spreading through her body, a sense of comfort, of peace. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. She saw the admiration, the pride, the love. But she also saw something else, something that she hadn't seen before. A flicker of vulnerability, a hint of fear. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a silent thought, her mind reaching out to his. He hesitated, his expression clouded, his eyes avoiding hers. "The rogues, they're becoming bolder," he said. "More organized. There is something driving them. Something dark." His words sent a chill down her spine. The rogue wolf had been a test, a challenge, but it was also a warning, a sign of things to come. There were greater dangers lurking in the shadows, greater threats to the hunt, to their way of life. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers, his expression serious.
"We must prepare," he said.
"We must gather the hunt. We must fight."
Fight.
The word hung in the air, heavy and pregnant with unspoken meaning. It was a word that spoke of danger, of sacrifice, of loss. But it was also a word that spoke of courage, of resilience, of hope. Talia felt a surge of determination, a fierce protectiveness, a love for Lorcan, for the hunt, for the life she was just beginning to reclaim. She would fight. She would protect. She would survive. She nuzzled against him, her body seeking his warmth, his strength, his presence. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, his heart beating against hers. It was not only the strength that drew her, but also the emotion. The vulnerability that showed Lorcan was not just a powerful leader of the hunt, but also capable of deep feeling. It was a moment of intimacy, of connection, of love. A moment that transcended their different forms, their different worlds, their different pasts. But the moment was fleeting, broken by a sudden sound, a distant horn, a call to the hunt. It was time to return, to face the challenges that awaited them, to embrace their destiny. As they prepared to shift, to leave the clearing, Talia couldn't shake the feeling that the rogue wolf was only the beginning of their troubles. What darkness was driving the rogues, and how could she, still learning to control her own powers, hope to stand against it? Chapter 12. Betrayal in the Mist. The horn's call echoed through the forest, a summons that both Talia and Lorcan couldn't ignore. It was a call to gather, to prepare, to face the growing threat of the rogues, of the darkness that was driving them. They shifted back to their human forms, the transformation seamless and effortless for Lorcan, still a bit awkward and unsettling for Talia. She felt a momentary vulnerability, a sense of being exposed. Without the protection of her wolf fur, her sharp teeth, her wild instincts. But Lorcan's presence, his warmth, his strength, his love, reassured her. He took her hand, his grip firm and comforting, and led her back towards the heart of the hunt, towards the gathering of their kind. As they walked, the forest grew thicker, the trees taller, the air heavier, the silence more profound. A thick mist began to swirl around them, obscuring their vision, muffling the sounds, creating a sense of unease. Talia felt a prickling on her skin, a sense of being watched, of being hunted. She glanced at Lorcan, her eyes searching his, her expression questioning. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a low whisper, her words barely audible above the rustling of the leaves. He didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the mist ahead, his body tense, his senses on high alert. He stopped walking, his grip tightening on her hand, pulling her close to him. "Something's not right," he said, his voice a low murmur, his words barely a breath. "I feel a presence. Something familiar."
Familiar.
The word sent a chill down Talia's spine. She knew what he meant. She felt it too. It was the same presence she had felt in the clearing, the rogue wolf, but it was different. Stronger. More menacing. And then she saw it. A figure emerging from the mist, slowly, gradually, taking shape, becoming recognizable. It was a wolf, but not the rogue she had fought earlier. This wolf was larger, more powerful, its fur a silvery gray, its eyes a piercing blue, its stance regal. It was a member of the hunt, one of Lorcan's pack, one of his trusted lieutenants. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The wolf's eyes, usually filled with loyalty, with respect, with affection, were now cold, hard, and filled with hatred. "Alistair," Lorcan said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and pain. "Well, what is the meaning of this?" The wolf Alistair didn't answer. He simply smiled, a slow, cruel smile that revealed sharp, white teeth. It was a smile that sent a shiver of terror down Talia's spine. And then he spoke, his voice a silent thought, a mental communication that was both shocking and devastating. "You were a fool, Lorcan," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "To trust her. To bring her back. She is the key, the weapon, the destroyer." Destroyer. The word echoed Talia's earlier fears, her doubts, her insecurities. Was she truly a threat to the hunt, a danger to those she was beginning to care for, to love?
"What are you talking about?"
Lorcan asked, his voice tight with anger, his body trembling with barely controlled fury. "Talia is one of us. She is my mate."
Mate.
The word, spoken with such conviction, such unwavering certainty, sent a wave of warmth through Talia, melting the ice of fear that had gripped her heart. But it also fueled Alistair's anger, his hatred, his betrayal. "She's a lie," Alistair said, his voice rising in intensity. "A deception. She is not who she seems. She is the enemy." He lunged, not at Lorcan, but at Talia, his intention clear, his purpose deadly. Lorcan reacted instantly, pushing Talia behind him, shielding her with his body, meeting Alistair's attack with a ferocity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. They fought, two powerful wolves, their bodies a blur of fur and teeth, of growls and snarls, of shadows and secrets. It was a battle not just of physical strength, but of wills, of loyalties, of love and betrayal. Talia watched, helpless, her heart pounding with fear, with grief, with rage. She wanted to help, to fight, to protect Lorcan, but she knew that she was not yet strong enough, not yet skilled enough, to face a warrior like Alistair. She saw Alistair land a blow, his claws raking across Lorcan's flank, drawing a yelp of pain. She saw Lorcan stumble, his body weakening, his strength fading. She had to do something. She couldn't just stand there and watch him die. She had to act. But how could a newly turned wolf, betrayed by one of the hunt's own, hope to make a difference against such a seasoned warrior? And what did Alistair mean by calling her the destroyer? Chapter 13. The Chains of Destiny. Talia's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest like a trapped bird. She couldn't stand idly by while Lorcan fought Alistair, a seasoned warrior fueled by a betrayal she didn't understand. She had to act, but how? She was still new to her powers, still learning to control her shape-shifting, her magic. Then, she remembered her mother's journal, the words she had read, the lessons she had learned. Her mother had written of the ancient pact, of the bond between their bloodline and the wild hunt, of the responsibilities that came with their power. She had written of a specific magic, a binding spell, a power that could control, could restrain. It was a dangerous magic, a power that could be used for good or for evil. But in this moment, it was her only hope, her only chance to save Lorcan, to stop Alistair, to understand. She closed her eyes, focusing her mind, channeling her energy, drawing on the ancient magic that flowed through her veins. She visualized the chains, the bonds, the restraints, forming in her mind, taking shape, becoming real. She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on Alistair, her voice a silent thought, a mental command that was both powerful and desperate. Bind him, she commanded, her will reaching out, wrapping around Alistair, tightening, constricting, forcing him to stop. At first, nothing happened. Alistair continued to fight, his claws raking against Lorcan's fur, his teeth sinking into his flesh. Lorcan was weakening, his movements slowing, his strength fading. But then, Talia felt a surge of power, a rush of energy, a connection to the ancient magic, to her heritage, to herself. She felt the chains forming, not physical chains, but ethereal bonds made of moonlight and shadow, of will and magic. The chains wrapped around Alistair, binding his limbs, restricting his movements, forcing him to halt. He struggled against them, his body thrashing, his growls turning into frustrated yelps, but the chains held, unbreakable, unyielding. Lorcan, seeing his opportunity, took a step back, his chest heaving, his body bruised and bleeding, but his eyes filled with relief. He looked at Talia, his expression a mixture of gratitude, of admiration, of love. You did it, he said, his voice a silent thought, his mind reaching out to hers.
You saved me.
Talia didn't answer, her focus still on Alistair, on the chains that bound him, on the betrayal that had driven him. Why, Alistair? She asked, her voice a silent thought, her mind probing his, searching for answers, for understanding. Why would you do this? Why would you betray Lorcan? Why would you betray the hunt? Alistair's eyes, still filled with hatred, met hers. He didn't speak, but his thoughts, raw and unfiltered, flooded her mind, revealing a truth that was both shocking and devastating. He believed that Talia was a threat, a danger to the hunt, a destroyer. He had been manipulated, deceived, by a dark force, a power that sought to control the hunt, to use its magic for its own selfish ends. He had been told that Talia was the key, the weapon, that she would bring about the hunt's downfall, that she would destroy everything they held dear. They showed me, Alistair said, his voice a silent thought, his mind filled with pain, with regret, with shame. They showed me a future where you destroyed us all. Talia felt a chill run down her spine. The future? Could it be true? Was she truly destined to destroy the hunt, to betray Lorcan, to become the enemy? She looked at Lorcan, her eyes searching his, her expression pleading. It's not true, she said, her voice a silent thought, her mind reaching out to his. I could never, Lorcan smiled, a weak, tired smile, but a smile filled with trust. I know, he said, his voice a silent thought, his mind touching hers. I know you wouldn't. His faith in her, his unwavering belief in her goodness, in her love, melted the ice of doubt that had gripped her heart. She knew, with a certainty that went beyond reason, beyond logic, that she would never betray him, that she would never betray the hunt. But the question remained. Who were they? Who had manipulated Alistair, who had shown him this false future, who was seeking to destroy the hunt? And how could Talia, still struggling to control her own powers, hope to stand against such a powerful, insidious enemy? The chains of destiny felt heavy, but the weight of an unknown enemy was heavier still. Chapter 14. Awakening the Inner Beast. The chains that bound Alistair shimmered, a visible manifestation of Talia's will, her power, her control. But the control was fragile, a tenuous thread that threatened to snap at any moment. She could feel the strain, the effort it took to maintain the binding spell, the drain on her energy, her magic. She knew she couldn't hold him forever. She needed answers, she needed to understand, she needed to find a way to stop the darkness that was threatening the hunt. "Who showed you this future, Alistair?" she asked, her voice a silent thought, her mind probing his, demanding answers, seeking truth. Alistair struggled against the chains, his body trembling with rage, with shame, with fear. He didn't want to answer. He didn't want to betray his manipulators. But Talia's will was stronger, her power overwhelming. "The Shadow Coven," he finally said, his voice a silent thought, his mind filled with pain, with regret, with despair. They showed me. They promised power, control, a new order. The Shadow Coven. The name sent a shiver down Talia's spine. She had heard of them, whispered tales in the village, legends of a dark, ancient magic, a power that sought to corrupt, to control, to destroy. They were the enemy, the force behind the rogues, the manipulators of Alistair, the threat to the hunt. "What do they want?" she asked, her voice a silent thought, her mind pressing him, demanding answers, seeking understanding. "They want you," Alistair said, his voice a silent thought, his mind filled with a chilling clarity. "They want your power. They want to use you to control the hunt." Talia felt a surge of anger, a fierce protectiveness, a determination to fight, to protect herself, to protect Lorcan, to protect the hunt. "They will not have me," she said, her voice a silent thought, her mind filled with a newfound resolve, a power that surprised even herself. "I will not be their weapon. I will not be their destroyer." She looked at Lorcan, his eyes filled with admiration, with gratitude, with love. He nodded, a silent affirmation, a promise of support, a shared destiny. She turned back to Alistair, her gaze hardening, her voice a silent command, her will unwavering. "Release him," she said, not to Alistair, but to the chains, to the magic that bound him, to herself. The chains shimmered, fading, dissolving, disappearing into the mist, leaving Alistair free, unbound, but broken. He collapsed to the ground, his body trembling, his eyes filled with remorse. Talia knew she couldn't trust him. Not yet. He had been manipulated, deceived, but he had also betrayed them. He had attacked Lorcan. He had threatened her. "Take him," she said to Lorcan, her voice a silent thought, her mind conveying her intentions, her plan. "Keep him safe. But keep him guarded." Lorcan nodded, understanding her meaning, her caution, her wisdom. He approached Alistair, his expression a mixture of pity and anger. He helped him to his feet, supporting his weight, leading him away, deeper into the forest, towards the heart of the hunt. Talia watched them go, her heart heavy with sadness, with worry, with fear. But she also felt a surge of power, a newfound confidence, a sense of purpose. She had faced her first real challenge. She had used her magic. She had saved Lorcan. She had begun to awaken the inner beast, the warrior, the witch that she was meant to be. But the fight was far from over. The Shadow Coven was still out there, plotting, scheming, threatening everything. She turned, her gaze sweeping the forest, her senses on high alert, searching for any sign of danger, any hint of the enemy. She felt a stirring within her, a shifting, a changing. It was the call of the wild, the pull of her true nature, the urge to transform. She closed her eyes, embracing the feeling, surrendering to the power, letting go of her fear, her doubts, her human limitations. She felt her body changing, her bones shifting, her skin transforming, her senses heightening, her spirit soaring. She opened her eyes, her gaze no longer human, but wolf. She was larger now, stronger, more powerful than before. Her fur was a silvery gray, her eyes a piercing blue, her stance regal. She was no longer just a wolf, a shapeshifter, a warrior. She was a leader, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. She threw back her head and howled, a long, powerful, triumphant sound that echoed through the forest. It was a call to the hunt, a declaration of her strength, a promise of vengeance. The transformation was more than physical, it was a claiming of her destiny. But with Alistair's betrayal fresh, and the Shadow Coven's plans unknown, what allies could Talia truly rely on, and what sacrifices would this newfound power demand? Chapter 15. A pact sealed in blood. The howl resonated through the ancient trees, a declaration of Talia's transformation, her acceptance of her power, her readiness to fight. It was a sound that spoke of wildness, of freedom, of defiance. As the echoes faded, she felt a presence approaching, not the threatening presence of the rogues or the manipulated Alistair, but a familiar, comforting presence, a warmth that soothed her soul. It was Lorcan, returning from securing Alistair, his expression a mixture of relief, of admiration, of love. He was in his human form, his golden eyes shining in the dim light filtering through the mist. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze sweeping over her wolf form, taking in her size, her strength, her regal bearing. He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes, making them sparkle with a warmth that melted the lingering fear that still clung to her. "You are magnificent," he said, his voice a low murmur, his words spoken aloud this time, not through the silent communication of their minds. It was a sound that grounded her, reminded her of the connection they shared, the bond that transcended their different forms, their different worlds. She lowered her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, of gratitude, of affection. She felt a warmth spreading through her, a sense of belonging, of peace. He took a step closer, then another, and another, until he was standing just inches away. He reached out, his hand hovering over her head, hesitant, as if asking for permission. She leaned into his touch, a silent invitation, and he gently stroked her fur, his fingers tracing the contours of her body, sending shivers of pleasure through her. "We must prepare," he said, his voice serious, his eyes searching hers, even in her wolf form. "The Shadow Coven will not wait. They will strike again. And we must be ready." She nodded, a silent agreement, her mind understanding the urgency, the danger, the responsibility. He continued to stroke her fur, his touch lingering on her back, his fingers tracing a pattern, a symbol, a rune. She felt a tingling sensation, a surge of energy, a connection to Lorcan, to the hunt, to the ancient magic. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice a silent thought, her mind reaching out to his. "A binding spell," he replied, his voice a silent thought, his mind touching hers. "A pact. A promise. To protect each other. To fight together. To be together." It was a ritual, an ancient ceremony, a bonding of their souls. It was a magic that went beyond the physical, beyond the rational, beyond words. He continued to trace the rune, his fingers drawing blood, both hers and his, mingling the crimson liquid, sealing the pact, binding them together, forever. She felt a surge of power, a rush of energy, a connection to Lorcan that was stronger, deeper, more profound than anything she had ever experienced before. It was a feeling of completeness, of unity, of love. He finished the rune, his hand lingering on her fur, his touch sending a final wave of warmth through her. He looked into her eyes, his golden gaze holding hers, unwavering, unwavering. "We are one now. Talia," he said, his voice a silent thought, his mind speaking directly to hers. Bound by blood, by magic, by love. She felt a tear roll down her cheek, a single drop of moisture that mingled with her fur. It was a tear not of sadness, not of fear, but of joy. She nuzzled against him, her body seeking his warmth, his strength, his presence. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, his heart beating against hers. It was a moment of peace, of solace, of connection, in the midst of the gathering storm. a moment that would sustain them, strengthen them, prepare them for the battles to come. But as they stood there, embraced in the heart of the forest, a new sound reached them, a distant drumming, a rhythmic beat that pulsed through the earth, through the trees, through their very souls. It was the sound of the hunt gathering, the call of their kind, summoning them to war. The pact was sealed, their bond strengthened, but the drumming was a stark reminder of the imminent threat. Where would the hunt gather, and what strategies would they need to employ against the elusive Shadow Coven? Chapter 16. The Gathering Storm. The drumming grew louder, more insistent, a primal rhythm that resonated deep within Talia's bones, calling her to action, to duty, to the hunt. It was a sound that spoke of power, of unity, of impending conflict. Lorcan pulled back slightly, his arms still lingering around her, his golden eyes searching hers, even in her wolf form. "It is time," he said, his voice a low murmur, his words a mixture of solemnity and determination. Talia nodded, a silent agreement, her mind understanding the urgency, the necessity, the inevitability. They shifted back to their human forms, the transformation now smoother, easier, more natural for Talia. She felt a renewed sense of strength, of confidence, of purpose. The binding spell, the pact sealed in blood, had solidified her connection to Lorcan, to the hunt, to her own power. He took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring, and they began to walk, following the sound of the drumming, deeper into the forest, towards the gathering place. As they walked, the mist began to dissipate, revealing a vast, open space, a natural amphitheater surrounded by towering trees. In the center of the clearing, a bonfire blazed, casting flickering shadows on the faces of the assembled hunt. There were dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, in both human and wolf forms, their eyes gleaming in the firelight, their bodies tense with anticipation, their energy palpable. Talia felt a surge of belonging, of kinship. These were her people, her family, her allies. They were warriors, shapeshifters, protectors of the balance, guardians of the ancient ways. As Lorcan and Talia entered the clearing, a hush fell over the assembled hunt. All eyes turned towards them, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, of respect, of anticipation. Lorcan raised his hand, a gesture of greeting, of command, of unity. "The hunt gathers," he proclaimed, his voice strong and resonant, echoing through the clearing. "The Shadow Coven threatens us, seeks to control us, to destroy us. But we will not yield. We will not be broken. We will fight." His words were met with a roar of approval, a chorus of howls and shouts, a declaration of their defiance, their determination, their unity. Talia felt a surge of pride, of courage. She was one of them, a member of the hunt, a warrior, a protector. She would stand with them, fight with them, die with them if necessary. Lorcan led her to the center of the clearing, near the bonfire, where a circle of elders stood, their faces etched with wisdom, with experience, with concern. These were the leaders of the hunt, the keepers of the ancient knowledge, the strategists of the coming war. "Talia Aldrin has returned to us," Lorcan announced, his voice filled with pride, with love. "She has embraced her power, her heritage, her destiny. She stands with us, ready to fight, ready to lead." The elders nodded, their eyes studying Talia, assessing her strength, her resolve, her worthiness. One of them, an ancient woman with long, silver hair and piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. "Welcome, Talia," she said, her voice raspy with age, but filled with power. "We have long awaited your return. The hunt needs you. The world needs you." Talia bowed her head, a gesture of respect, of gratitude, of humility. "I am honored," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I will do everything in my power to protect the hunt, to defeat the Shadow Coven, to fulfill my destiny." The elder smiled, a knowing smile that sent a shiver of anticipation through Talia. "You have much to learn," she said. "But you have the strength, the courage, the magic. You will be a formidable force against the darkness." The elders then began to discuss the situation, the threat of the Shadow Coven, the strategies they would need to employ, the sacrifices they might have to make. Talia listened intently, absorbing their knowledge, their wisdom, their experience. She learned of the Shadow Coven's history, their powers, their weaknesses. She learned of the alliances they would need to forge, the battles they would need to fight, the dangers they would face. The storm was gathering, the clouds darkening, the wind rising. The war was imminent, inevitable, and unavoidable. As the hunt made their plans, a sense of foreboding settled over Talia. What specific weaknesses did the Shadow Coven possess, and what sacrifices would Talia and Lorcan be forced to make in the coming conflict? Chapter 17. Echoes of Loss and Longing. The elders spoke of the Shadow Coven's reliance on a particular type of magic, a dark, twisted form of energy drawn from fear, from pain, from loss. They thrived on negativity, on chaos, on despair. This was their strength, but also their weakness. They are vulnerable to light, the ancient elder, whose name was Lyra, explained. To joy, to hope, to love. These emotions disrupt their power, weaken their spells, shatter their illusions. Talia understood. It was the opposite of the hunt's magic, which drew its strength from nature, from connection, from balance. It was a fundamental difference, a dichotomy that defined the conflict, the war between them. We must attack their source, Lorcan said, his voice firm, his eyes filled with determination. We must find where they draw their power, where they gather, where they plot. We believe they are centered in the ruins of Blackwood Manor, another elder, a tall, muscular man named Gareth, said. A place steeped in darkness, in tragedy, in despair. It is a place of power, a nexus of their evil. Blackwood Manor. Talia felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard of it, whispered tales in Oakhaven, legends of a haunted place, a place of death, of sorrow, of unspeakable horrors. It is heavily guarded, Lyra added. Protected by spells, by creatures, by shadows. It will not be easy to penetrate. But it must be done, Lorcan said, his voice unwavering. We must strike at the heart of their power, before they can strike at ours. The elders agreed, nodding their heads, their faces grim, their eyes filled with resolve. They began to discuss strategies, to plan the attack, to prepare for war. They spoke of formations, of spells, of weapons. Talia listened, absorbing their knowledge, their wisdom, their experience. But her mind was elsewhere, drawn to the image of Blackwood Manor, to the echoes of loss and longing that it evoked. She felt a connection to the place, a strange, unsettling feeling that she couldn't explain. It was as if she had been there before, as if she had experienced the darkness, the tragedy, the despair. She closed her eyes, trying to focus, trying to understand, trying to remember. And then she saw it, a flash of memory, a fleeting image, a vision. She was a child, a young girl, running through a dark, foreboding forest, her heart pounding with fear, her tears streaming down her face. She was being chased, hunted by shadows. She reached a manor, a large, imposing building, its windows dark and empty, its walls crumbling, its atmosphere heavy with despair. She saw a woman, her mother, standing at the entrance, her face pale and strained, her eyes filled with terror. She saw a dark figure, a shadow, emerge from the manor, its eyes burning with an evil light, its voice a chilling whisper. She saw her mother fall, struck down by the shadow, her body collapsing to the ground, her life extinguished. Talia gasped, her eyes flying open, her body trembling, her heart breaking. It was Blackwood Manor, the place where her mother had died, the place where the Shadow Coven gathered. She understood now. The connection she felt, the echoes of loss and longing, were not just memories, they were warnings. It's a trap, she said, her voice urgent, her words cutting through the elders' discussion, drawing their attention, their concern. They looked at her, their eyes questioning, their expressions skeptical. What do you mean? Lorcan asked, his voice filled with worry, his hand reaching out to touch hers, to reassure her. I've seen it, she said, her voice trembling, her eyes filled with tears. I've seen Blackwood Manor. I've seen my mother's death. It's where they want us to go. It's where they will ambush us. The elders exchanged glances, their faces grim, their eyes filled with doubt. Are you sure, Talia? Lyra asked, her voice gentle, but firm. This is a serious accusation. We cannot change our plans based on a vision. I'm sure, Talia insisted, her voice stronger now, fueled by conviction, by certainty. I saw it. I felt it. It's a trap. We must find another way. Lorcan looked at her, his eyes searching hers, his expression a mixture of love and trust. He believed her. He knew she wouldn't lie, she wouldn't deceive them. We will consider your warning. Talia, he said, his voice calm, his authority unquestionable. But we must proceed with caution. We cannot afford to make a mistake. The elders, swayed by Lorcan's faith in Talia, agreed to reconsider their plans, to investigate further, to seek confirmation. The vision had shaken them, but it had also strengthened Talia's position within the hunt. What other information could she glean from her fragmented memories, and would it be enough to overcome the Shadow Coven's trap? Chapter 18. The Wild Hunt's Fury. The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Talia's vision, her warning about Blackwood Manor, had cast a shadow of doubt, of uncertainty, over their plans. The elders, while agreeing to reconsider their strategy, were still wary, still skeptical. Lorcan, however, stood by Talia, his faith in her unwavering, his love a constant source of strength. He knew her intuition, her connection to the ancient magic was powerful, and he trusted it, even if he didn't fully understand it. We will send scouts, he announced, his voice firm, his authority unquestionable, to investigate Blackwood Manor, to confirm Talia's vision, to assess the danger. The elders nodded, their agreement reluctant, but necessary. They understood the need for caution, the importance of gathering intelligence, the potential consequences of a mistake. Volunteers were chosen, experienced trackers, skilled shapeshifters, warriors who could move unseen, unheard, through the shadows. They were tasked with infiltrating Blackwood Manor, observing the enemy, assessing their strength, identifying their weaknesses. As the scouts prepared to depart, Talia felt a surge of responsibility. Her vision had changed their plans, altered their course, put these warriors in danger. She approached Lorcan, her eyes filled with concern, her voice pleading. "Be careful," she said. "Please. I don't want anyone to get hurt. Because of me." Lorcan smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile that melted the ice of worry that had gripped her heart. He reached out and cupped her cheek, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her. "We will be careful, Talia," he said, his voice soft, his eyes filled with love. "And it's not because of you. It's because of us. Because of the hunt. Because of what we're fighting for." His words calmed her fears, reassured her, strengthened her resolve. She knew he was right. They were fighting for something bigger than themselves, for their freedom, for their survival, for their future. The scouts departed, disappearing into the darkness, their movements silent, their presence unseen. The remaining hunt members dispersed, returning to their camps, preparing for the coming battle, their anticipation tinged with uncertainty. Talia and Lorcan remained by the bonfire, its flames casting flickering shadows on their faces, its warmth a comfort in the growing chill of the night. "What do you think they'll find?" Talia asked, her voice a low murmur, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. Lorcan shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know," he said. "But I trust your vision, Talia. I believe you. And if it's a trap, we'll be ready for it." He reached out and took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, holding her tight, his heart beating against hers. It was a moment of intimacy, of connection, of love, in the midst of the gathering storm. A moment that reminded them of what they were fighting for, of what they could lose. They stood there, embraced in the silence, for a long time, drawing strength from each other, finding comfort in their shared destiny. But then, a sound broke the silence, a distant scream, a cry of pain, a warning. It was one of the scouts, returning from Blackwood Manor, his body battered, his spirit broken. It's true, he gasped, his voice weak, his eyes filled with terror. It's a trap. They were waiting for us. They knew we were coming. Talia felt a chill run down her spine. Her vision had been confirmed, her warning validated. But it was too late. The scouts had been ambushed, the enemy alerted. Lorcan's grip tightened on her hand, his body tensing, his eyes hardening. How many? He asked, his voice tight with anger, with concern. I don't know, the scout stammered. Too many. They were everywhere. Shadows, creatures, spells we didn't stand a chance. Lorcan released Talia, his expression grim. He turned to address the remaining hunt members, who had gathered around, their faces filled with alarm, with anticipation. The Shadow Coven knows we're coming, he announced, his voice strong and resonant, echoing through the clearing. They have set a trap. But we will not be deterred. We will not be intimidated. We will adapt. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled hunt, his eyes filled with determination. We will not attack Blackwood Manor directly, he continued. We will draw them out. We will lure them into the open. We will unleash the wild hunt's fury. His words were met with a roar of approval, a chorus of howls and shouts, a declaration of their defiance, their resilience, their power. The trap was sprung, but the hunt would not be caught. What specific plan would Lorcan devise, and how would Talia's unique connection to Blackwood Manor play a role in the coming battle? Chapter 19. The Price of Redemption. Lorcan's declaration ignited a fire within the hunt, a fierce determination to overcome the Shadow Coven's trap, to turn their deception against them, to unleash their full power. The elders, initially skeptical of Talia's vision, now recognized her insight, her value, her crucial role in their fight. They gathered around Lorcan, their faces grim, their eyes filled with a newfound respect, a shared resolve. We need a plan, Lyra said, her voice firm, her gaze sweeping over the assembled hunt. A strategy to draw them out, to lure them into a battle on our terms, to defeat them. We will use the forest, Lorcan said, his voice calm, his authority unquestionable. It is our domain, our strength, our advantage. We will become the shadows, the whispers, the unseen predators. He outlined his plan, a strategy of deception, of misdirection, of guerrilla warfare. They would divide into smaller groups, each with a specific task, a designated target, a coordinated attack. They would use their shape-shifting abilities, their connection to nature, their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. They would harass the enemy, disrupt their communications, sabotage their supplies, weaken their resolve. They would draw them out, lure them into a trap of their own, a place where the hunt could unleash their full fury, where they could overwhelm them. And where will this trap be set? Gareth asked, his voice curious, his eyes fixed on Lorcan. Lorcan smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of anticipation through Talia. Near Blackwood Manor, he said. But not at the manor itself. We will use Talia's connection to the place, her memories, her vision, to our advantage. He turned to Talia, his eyes filled with love, with trust, with reliance. Talia, he said, you know the area around Blackwood Manor better than anyone. You know the paths, the hiding places, the secrets. You will guide us. You will lead us. You will help us set the trap. Talia felt a surge of responsibility. Her vision had saved them from the initial ambush, but now she was being asked to do more, to lead them, to guide them, to help them win. She nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. I will, she said, her voice clear and strong. I know a place. A clearing, near the river, where the trees are thick, the shadows are deep, the magic is strong. She described the place, a hidden sanctuary, a place she had visited as a child, a place where she had felt safe, protected, connected to the wild. It was a place where the hunt could gather, unseen, unheard, where they could prepare their attack, where they could unleash their fury. The elders agreed, their faces grim. their eyes filled with determination. They recognized the strategic advantage, the potential for success, the price of redemption. The plan was set. The hunt would divide, disperse, deceive, and destroy. They would use their skills, their powers, their unity to overcome the Shadow Coven's trap, to turn their darkness against them, to reclaim their freedom. As the hunt prepared to depart, Talia felt a hand on her shoulder, a familiar touch, a comforting presence. It was Alistair, his eyes filled with remorse, with shame, with a desperate plea for forgiveness. "Talia," he said, his voice low, his words barely a whisper. I am sorry. For everything. For my betrayal, for my weakness, for my blindness." Talia looked at him, her heart aching with sadness, with pity, with a flicker of understanding. She knew he had been manipulated, deceived, but he had also made a choice that had nearly cost them everything. "I know you were manipulated, Alistair," she said, her voice gentle, but firm. "But you still betrayed us. You still attacked Lorcan.
You still threaten me."
Alistair nodded, his head bowed, his body trembling with regret. "I know," he said. "And I will spend the rest of my life atoning for my sins. I will fight with you, Talia. I will protect you. I will redeem myself." His words were sincere, his plea genuine. Talia saw the pain in his eyes, the remorse in his heart, the desperation for forgiveness. She reached out and touched his arm, a gesture of acceptance, of hope. "You will have your chance, Alistair," she said. "But trust it must be earned, not given." Alistair nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude, with determination, with a renewed loyalty. He would fight with the hunt. He would prove his worth. He would earn his redemption. The price of redemption was high, but it was a price Alistair was willing to pay. What specific role would he play in the coming battle, and would his actions be enough to regain the trust of the hunt and of Talia? Chapter 20. The Final Confrontation of Hearts. The hunt moved like shadows through the forest, silent, swift, and deadly. Talia led the way, guided by her memories, her instincts, her connection to the land. Lorcan walked beside her, his presence a constant reassurance, his love a source of strength. Alistair followed closely behind, his eyes filled with a mixture of remorse and determination, his loyalty newly reforged. He was given a crucial, yet dangerous task, to act as a decoy, to draw the Shadow Coven's attention away from the main force, to buy them time. It was a test, a trial by fire, a chance for redemption. He accepted it willingly, knowing the risks, understanding the stakes, embracing the opportunity to prove his worth. As they approached the clearing Talia had described, a sense of anticipation, of tension, of impending conflict filled the air. The forest grew darker, the trees thicker, the shadows deeper. Talia stopped at the edge of the clearing, her hand raised, a signal to halt, to wait, to prepare. The hunt members dispersed, melting into the shadows, becoming one with the forest, their presence unseen, unheard. Lorcan joined Talia, his eyes scanning the clearing, his senses on high alert, his body tense with anticipation. "This is it," he said, his voice a low murmur, his words barely a whisper. "The trap is set. Now we wait." They waited, silent, motionless, hidden, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The minutes stretched into an eternity, the silence deafening. And then they heard it. The sound of footsteps, of voices, of shadows approaching. The Shadow Coven had arrived. They emerged from the forest, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, their faces hidden behind dark hoods, their bodies cloaked in shadows, their energy palpable. They were led by a tall, imposing figure, a woman with long, black hair and piercing blue eyes, her face pale and strained, her presence radiating power. It was the leader of the Shadow Coven, the one who had manipulated Alistair, the one who had shown Talia the false future, the enemy. Talia felt a surge of anger, of hatred, of a fierce determination to fight, to protect, to destroy. The Shadow Coven members spread out, searching the clearing, their eyes scanning the shadows, their senses seeking their prey. They found Alistair, standing alone in the center of the clearing, his body exposed, his stance defiant.
You?
The leader of the Shadow Coven hissed, her voice filled with contempt, with fury. You betrayed us. Alistair smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of fear down Talia's spine. I did, he said, his voice clear and strong. And I would do it again. For the hunt. For Talia. For Lorcan. His words were a challenge, a provocation, a declaration of war. The leader of the Shadow Coven raised her hand, a gesture of command, of death. Her followers lunged, attacking Alistair, their weapons drawn, their spells unleashed. But Alistair was ready. He fought with the fury of a cornered wolf, his movements swift and deadly, his loyalty unwavering. He bought them time, precious seconds, allowing the hunt to prepare their attack. And then Lorcan gave the signal. The hunt erupted from the shadows, a wave of fur and teeth, of claws and spells, of wild, untamed fury. Talia transformed, her body shifting, her bones cracking, her spirit soaring. She was a wolf again, a magnificent silver wolf, her eyes burning with a fierce, blue light. She joined the battle, her movements swift and graceful, her teeth sinking into flesh, her claws raking against bone, her magic unleashed. Lorcan fought beside her, his human form wielding a sword of ancient silver, his wolf form a whirlwind of teeth and claws, his love a constant source of strength. The clearing became a battlefield, a chaos of shadows and light, of screams and howls, of death and destruction. The hunt fought with courage, with skill, with a fierce determination to win. But the Shadow Coven was powerful, their numbers overwhelming. Talia saw Lorcan fall, struck down by a dark spell, his body collapsing to the ground, his life in danger. She rushed to his side, her heart pounding with fear, with grief, with rage. She stood over him, protecting him, shielding him, fighting off the attackers, her fury unleashed. She saw the leader of the Shadow Coven approaching, her eyes fixed on Lorcan, her intention clear. Talia knew she had to stop her. She had to protect Lorcan. She had to end this. She lunged, her body a blur of silver fur, her teeth bared, her heart filled with a fierce, protective love. She met the leader of the Shadow Coven in a final, desperate clash, a confrontation of wills, of powers, of destinies. It was a battle not just of bodies, but of hearts, of souls, of everything they held dear. Who would prevail in this ultimate showdown, and what would be the final cost of victory, or defeat? Epilogue. The clash was brutal, a whirlwind of magic and fury. Talia, fueled by her love for Lorcan, by her loyalty to the hunt, by her awakened power, fought with a ferocity she had never known before. The leader of the Shadow Coven, driven by her ambition, by her darkness, by her desperation, matched her blow for blow. Spells collided, energy crackled, the very air vibrated with the intensity of their struggle. Talia felt the pain of the Shadow Coven's magic, the darkness trying to consume her, to break her. But she held on, her will unwavering, her spirit unbroken. She drew strength from her connection to Lorcan, to the hunt, to the ancient magic that flowed through her veins. She saw an opening, a moment of vulnerability in the Shadow Coven leader's defense, and she seized it. She focused her power, channeling her energy, unleashing a blast of pure, white light, a force that struck the leader with the force of a physical blow. The leader of the Shadow Coven staggered, her body trembling, her eyes widening in surprise, in pain, in defeat. The darkness that surrounded her flickered, wavered, began to dissipate. Talia pressed her advantage, her wolf form lunging, her teeth sinking into the leader's arm, her claws raking against her flesh, her magic disrupting her power. The leader of the Shadow Coven screamed, a cry of agony, of despair, of surrender. She collapsed to the ground, her body broken, her spirit crushed. The remaining Shadow Coven members, seeing their leader defeated, their power shattered, lost their will to fight. They fled, disappearing into the forest, their shadows melting into the darkness. The battle was over. The hunt had won. Talia transformed back to her human form, her body aching, her spirit exhausted. She rushed to Lorcan's side, her heart pounding with fear, with relief, with love. He was alive, but unconscious, his body weakened by the dark spell. She cradled him in her arms, her tears falling onto his face, her magic flowing into him, healing his wounds, restoring his strength. The other hunt members gathered around, their faces etched with exhaustion, with relief, with gratitude. They had survived. They had won. But the victory had come at a cost. Alistair lay nearby, his body broken, his spirit fading. He had fought bravely, redeemed himself, sacrificed himself to save them all. Talia knelt beside him, her hand reaching out to touch his, her heart aching with sadness. "Thank you, Alistair," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You saved us. You are forgiven." Alistair smiled, a weak, tired smile, but a smile filled with peace. He closed his eyes, his breathing slowing, his life ebbing away. He was gone. A hero. Redeemed. The hunt mourned their losses, celebrated their victory, and began to rebuild. They healed their wounds, both physical and emotional, strengthened their bonds, and prepared for the future. Talia and Lorcan, their love deepened by the shared struggle, by the shared sacrifice, by the shared victory, stood together, hand in hand, ready to lead the hunt, to protect the balance, to embrace their destiny. The Shadow Coven was defeated, their darkness extinguished. But the world was still a dangerous place, filled with challenges, with threats, with uncertainties. But the hunt was strong, united, and ready. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. They had found their strength, their courage, their love. And Talia, once a lost and lonely woman, had found her home, her family, her purpose. She was Talia Eldrin, a warrior, a witch, a leader, a lover. She was a member of the Wild Hunt. And she was free. The years that followed were filled with peace, a testament to their victory. The forest flourished, the hunt thrived, and the memory of the Shadow Coven faded into legend, a reminder of the darkness they had overcome and the enduring power of love and loyalty. The end.